Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the trilateral meeting of the Select Board, the Park Commissioners, and the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Tonight we're in the slightly claustrophobic but otherwise very pleasant Carol Blute Room. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the Select Board and the Park Commissioners to listen to recommendations from the Master Plan Implementation Committee on Milton Landing. And our new practice on the Select Board, stolen from the school committee, is to say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of our meetings, but there's no flag here in the Carol Blute Room, so we'll forego that tonight. And I understand from Cheryl that the practice of the planning board is to go around and say everyone's name at the beginning of the meeting, which I think is a good process here because we have the three committees, three boards meeting. So I'll ask us just go around and introduce yourselves around the room, around the table rather.
I'm Cheryl Tagayas, the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Bill Clark, planning director for the town.
Melinda Collins, select board member.
My name is Dick Burke. I'm a appointed member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Tabor Keeley, member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Liz Miller, member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Regina Malley, chair of the Board of Park Commissioners.
Scott McKay, Board of Park Commissioner member.
And Katie Conlon, wearing two hats, member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and here as a member of the Select Board.
And I'm Mike Zulis. I'm vice chair of the Select Board. The chair of the Select Board is a little bit delayed this evening, so he will be coming along and taking over at about 7:30 tonight, but we're going to charge ahead before he gets here. Again, in terms of the process tonight, the purpose is for the Park Commissioners and the Select Board to hear the recommendations of the Master Plan Implementation Committee with respect to Milton Landing. Just as a little bit of background, the Select Board referred the matter of the Friends of Milton Cruise request for a second dock to the Master Plan Implementation Committee back in the summer of 2016. And the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been going through a process since then, and that has included public forums and has included commissioning the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to do an extensive study of Milton Landing as part of the process. So for tonight, we'll have a presentation from the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and then if any residents want to make any comments after that, after the boards have had a chance to ask the Master Plan Implementation Committee, you're welcome to do so. We'd ask that you sign the sign-in sheet with your name, address, and an estimated time. If there are 5 people who want to speak for a half hour, that's a little bit different than if there are 3 people who want to speak for 15 minutes. So in terms of managing our time, if you could give us an idea, if you want to speak on that sheet of paper, how long you want to speak, and then we can manage things after that. So, are there any questions from anyone at the table here? Seeing none, any questions from anyone out in the audience? Seeing none, I will turn it over to Ms. Tagayas for the presentation of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. I have prepared a few slides. We have a letter of recommendation, which we'll go through after we go through kind of an overview. As Mike said, we started discussing the wharf area that our committee did shortly after our committee was formed in 2016. In the spring of 2017, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council was engaged to work with us. And as we got working with that and worked through our planning some, it became apparent that we needed some engineering expertise. And so Child's Engineering was engaged to do work which is really explore the water side, the feasibility of the water side of where you could put a dock. It's one thing to plan it on a piece of paper, and it's another thing to have someone with expertise analyze where a good location would be. So we started with one scope of work that led to another scope and led to another scope, and Child's is still doing work, and we'll get to that later. But I did want to highlight the investment the town has made from a financial point of view. Most of the funds have been allocated from the master plan budget line item in 2 fiscal years, 18 and 19. And then MAPC, we were awarded a grant from MAPC in $13,500. Portion of that grant went to the waterfront part of the study, and another part of the study that's not the subject of tonight has to do with zoning, and so another part of their grant went towards that. So this recommendation is really what we've been calling, and a lot of people here have heard us talk about, our kind of handoff to the bodies that actually have responsibility for taking these ideas further, to see if they agree with the ideas and to see what next steps might be involved in implementing the ideas. So the area we're talking about is where the Neponset comes out and goes towards Boston Harbor. This is the 88 Wharf Street condominium building. This is the Verizon building. This is Adams Street coming through here. The MBTA is over here. A park along the water, and then a dock here with supporting spaces for that waterfront access with boats moored in the water. So these first group of slides are taken from the MAPC presentation, which was given as a joint meeting of the MPIC and the Select Board on October 16th of 2017. So these existing conditions photos in nicer weather than we have now, how lovely and peaceful it is. Other times there's a lot of storage here. The historic former police lockup station, storage for the yacht club. I think a low tide situation here where the boats are sitting in the mud. The crew, storage of their shells on the park, which is where the farmers market is held. This is actually showing the high school women's crew team carrying the cruise shell that they carry from this location down to the dock. So that was one of the impetus for the study, was can we make this waterfront, can it accommodate work better for crew and still have the other users not be impeded with their uses. So this was kind of the diagram. I think it might be helpful if I turn the lights down for this part of it. The diagrams look kind of faded. There we go. So this is like an overhead diagram that the consultant used to work through a number of different options. And I think at that meeting in October of 17, there were options A, B, C, and D. And people were asked to weigh in on those options. And then a final recommendation was derived later after that. Those comments were considered. So again, oops, let me go back. Different orientation. So the existing dock here, 88 Wharf, Landing Park, the farmers market, and the former police lockup there. And then there is a green space along the river's edge here, parking next to it, which we'll get into some of the considerations of the uses, who owns what kinds of agreements there are. But this is the current situation. And then these are the parcel designations. So this parcel is Milton Landing Condominium Trust with some permanent and some not permanent easements. This is Park, Town of Milton Parks Department property. This is Town of Milton property. This is 88 Wharf Condominium Trust, MBTA. This is where the Swift Hat building is, which was also something that was being discussed at the time we started. Mr. Roberts had offered to the town that he would relocate the Swift Hat building, and it was suggesting that in this area it might be a good place for it. And then the actual users, so crew keep storing the shells here, walking across here and down to here. One of the things about this, not only is the walk, but the height of the dock is suitable for boats, but less suitable for putting a shell in the water. And so They also use this area. They have a trailer, or rather a storage unit that they store things in. So they've got things here, they've got things here, and they go across here. The blue is where the Milton Yacht Club their lease allows use of this portion of the property, including the former police lockup station. So the consultant was asked, based on the master plan itself, where a stated goal was to expand opportunity for all of Milton to enjoy the waterfront. And so some of it might be on the water, but some of it might just be bird watching or enjoying the serenity. So some of the principles that were used in analyzing the different option was, how to maximize the waterside access for different users, the current users and potentially new users. And then for some, what we heard was also to increase the aesthetic appeal of it, that some, particularly in the winter when in the summer when cradles and trailers are stored on the property, and in the winter when all of those and the boats are stored on the property, lacking visual appeal for some. And then with these cross relationships and agreements to find clarity around who's going to manage the waterfront and how there can be, it can be suitable for all the parties, not just the waterfront users, but people who might want to come down for the day in their own kayak or just to birdwatch or what have you. And then to also make it more well known to people what's there. So there's signage, the wayfinding, and historic markers are things that, this is quite a historic area, and it's and it has been pointed out, probably one of the most historic in Milton. And so right off of the bike trail, people could, on the Boston side, there are historic markers that describe the history, the Baker chocolate history, but on the Milton side, we don't have any. And then to help support the vitality of the village, that perhaps there could be shared parking that would work for the village businesses as well. Some of this I've gone into. I don't think we'll need to go through every bullet point here. It's in the report, and you can see which things we've been able to incorporate. And of course, you can't incorporate everything. These were all the ideas, and some things are easier to achieve than others. Also, people said, well, what about Captain's Landing? So Captain's Landing was the area, actually I should go back because I didn't point it out adequately here. Captain's Landing is town-owned here. And it's mostly mud. It does go back a little bit further. It was given to the town to provide access to the water, really thinking a beach at the time, right, Bill, that it was originally donated. But right now, it's not utilized at all. So people ask, well, could something happen there? Could there be a connection to Hutchinson's Field down further? You go by different properties doing that. It was something that was talked about as a long-term idea to look into. And as was Captain's Landing, but the consultant did suggest that there could be opportunities to develop that. So here would be a gazebo and then a connection down. One thing we did learn through the process was that anything like this, which would take away natural resource area, would be difficult to get approved. Something like this, which is up on like a dock like that, doesn't take away the resource area, would probably be easier to get approved at the state level. But these were some ideas that were looked at. And also at the time, this is the FEMA flood line. So the entire parking area and storage area and half of this park is within that floodplain line. So if the Swift Hat were to move, it was suggested that these would be potential locations to keep it out of that floodplain line. So as I mentioned, there had been the options A, B, C, D. There was a lot of feedback sought, and the consultant went back to work and came up with this recommended approach. And there's a spring, summer, fall recommendation, and then there's a winter recommendation. So in this recommendation, to allow maximum use of this space, there are 2 ramps currently, one here and one here. It was suggested to consolidate it into one and remove this one, and to take the one that's here, which is a rail kind of ramp, and I'm not an expert at these boat ramps, so if I misspeak, Bill or someone else can correct me. But it limits the way you can get boats in and out of the water. And if it were redesigned, that it would be much more convenient and easy to move the boats, and they could be moved much quicker, and therefore the amount of time that boats need to stay on the land side is reduced. And also the kinds of cradles that are used to store boats that go in using that rail system, they can't go off-site when they're being stored. So they do take up a lot of land area in the summer when the boats are in the water and the cradles are on the land side. So the idea was to redesign this ramp and to make it more, it actually would be easier for all users to use, even people bringing kayaks or canoes. And then to improve the aesthetic characteristics of it by making more green space here. And in that green space, there could be a seasonal opportunity for canoe, kayak, and board rentals. An outside vendor, there have been some who've expressed interest to come in and take advantage of that part of the waterfront to bring potentially new users, someone who's not a member of the yacht club, not a regular user of the water, but would come down and bring their family perhaps on a weekend to take advantage of the water. And then also introducing bike rack, again, sort of with the wayfinding would be able to, people on the bike path would see opportunities to come take advantage of the scenic qualities of the river and the waterfront. And then crew in this diagram has seasonal storage of their shells right near where they would go in. At this juncture, this was the location of a second dock, a lower dock. That evolved, which I'll get into. And then because there's storage here, and we also heard from crew and the farmers market, there's no restrooms that are available to the public, or even for the crew teams lockers to store things. So one thought was to consolidate all of storage and restroom and locker needs into a central location here next to the historic lockup. So where there are now kind of one-story small wood structures exclusive to the yacht club, this would become a shared facility. And then this would remain parking, and this would be flexible to be where boats, or in the summertime when the boats are in the water, that there could be additional parking here if the cradles are no longer there and trailers are stored off-site. Wayfinding, new services for the farmers market, including water and electricity, and also bike rack at that location. And then in the winter condition, the crew takes their shells and stores them elsewhere. Boats would be stored in the section here. This parking needs to remain. And then the dock is brought in. So in discussions with parties, and parties having discussions on their own and reporting back to our committee, and through the work of Child's Engineering and having done the engineering study, they did what's called a hydro survey, which is a survey of the surface underneath the water. And They came up with, which people, the users of the waterfront knew already, which is that there's limited times in which at low tide, the waterfront is not accessible by boat. And that's filled in over time with sediment. It hasn't always been exactly like that. So there was discussion of dredging. So if we did dredging and we had docks in 2 locations, we would end up needing to dredge in 2 locations. So there was discussion about having basically a 2-dock configuration at one location, one higher than the other. And this location was something that the Milton crew had suggested at the end of the existing dock. And then one of the locations for storing the shells had been in here. There's some change in topography across here, pretty steep in some places and trees, but there is some opportunity, thought that the crew shells could be stored there, in which case that would free up this portion potentially for other uses, such as the parking that's there now. So these locations, in fact, this amount of dredging that might be required, crew and the yacht club don't necessarily have the same needs in terms of dredging. Obviously, the larger boats have a different need for how deep the water needs to be to access. But the consultant has done an estimate of the volume of dredging that might be required there, and the soil will be tested to see what's in the soil, and that determines how expensive it is to remove. And if we have further questions about that, I'm sure Bill can provide us further detail. So taking those from that diagram, looking at this is a survey where the black line is here. The Alan Bishop of the engineering department put this map together. So these are the parcel lines here going up and down. This is 88 Wharf. This is the park. This is Wharf Street here, town parking lot, the former police lockup. So we were saying storage, shared storage and restrooms would be these 2 orange rectangles here. Improved green space for aesthetic appeal looking down this way is right here in this L shape. And then the potential crew shells during this season would be here in that piece that's kind of tucked in. And then adding the dock to that, you can see the relationships of these pieces so that all of these users have that sort of shared convenience to access the water. And then this area of parking and storage being sort of separate from it, instead of having it cross like it does currently with having crew down at the end and a dock at this end. So all access to the water either being through here or on the dock. So I'm just going to go back to here and put the lights back up, and then we can look at the report itself, which has more detail. First of all, does anybody from the committee want to add anything to what I've said thus far? No? Okay.
Which piece do you want? Which piece do you want?
Oh,
Leave the map.
well, I think we could just leave the map.
Cheryl, one piece was the dock, the Chapter 91 issue. I think the dredging would be required in order to conform to Chapter 91 too, because the dock can't sit on the mud.
That's true.
I mean, it's not, I mean, it's for the convenience of, certainly for the yacht club and probably for the crew team too, but it's a requirement for the Chapter 91 either way.
Correct. So, hello, Richard.
Good evening, Madam Chair, colleagues.
So again, the report from MAPC dated June 1st. We had meetings following that, and that's why the recommendation letter. So the recommendation letter dated January 14th of this year expands upon and has a few different suggestions in this report. But the background that's in the report, which I did very briefly here, you can follow through this and see the history of some of these things and some of the considerations of how we arrived at this recommendation. So on the letter itself, well, I guess we can talk a little bit about we talked about the background. In terms of the public engagement, the committee has met monthly since we were formed in 2016. All of our meetings have been posted and well attended. We've had several joint meetings, public forum, survey that was done at the public forum, survey that was put on the town website, and all of that background is in the report. So that's, and since then, we've had well-attended meetings with people providing their input as well. So the key findings that were in this report from MAPC include, so I just like to go through it because some of the overview is great, but some of the detail is really important here. So this new low dock for crew, kayak, and canoe users was a real focus for some time, and that's why the effort on the child's engineering and really getting more detailed information about the water side. So we did learn that due to an error someplace along the way, that the existing dock permit was never recorded. Is that right, Bill? And so
It's way before anyone in this room. Just for full.
no, we're not trying to assign blame to anyone. We're just trying to note that that's the status that we learned through this, and that Child's Engineering is working on getting that permitted now. Okay, so that's a very, I think, important piece of it. The other piece is that how realistic is it to close one ramp and rebuild this other ramp? And so having that work further investigated by Childs, and that's underway right now. And then the soil itself, because the costs, Bill, you have identified the dredging could be from $350 to $750.
Yes.
Anywhere from $350,000 to $750,000 to.
Not soil, you're talking about the silt. You're talking in the water, correct? You're talking in the river?
I think 7 was too high. I thought it was
Did
3
I?
to 6.
3 to 6, okay.
Either way, it's a lot of money.
But that's, if you did just dredging on the ramp itself, that would be 1,700 cubic yards. If you do the ramp and the dock, that is 4,160.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, 4,160. And we have 2 different options. One would be upland disposal, the second would be offshore disposal. The offshore disposal is contingent upon what is in the soil samples, how contaminated is or might be the soils there. If they're not too contaminated, you can take and dump them offshore. If they are contaminated, you have 2 choices. You can either put them to a landfill or you can take them to a closed landfill, which usually is out of state. Another potential use, if they are not grossly contaminated, is in one of those plans showed taking the beginning of Captain's Landing, closing off the old ramp, as varying the dredge spoilage within that site and capping it in that area. So you'd be getting rid of some of it. It's not an appreciable number, but it's a number that would take off of the dredging.
See the Boston is most of the project right now, they're about 3 months? Have you had any discussions with them at all?
No. But this was, the amounts were on the high side of 250 to the, for offshore, or for the smaller amount, and the larger one, the highest amount was 625, and that is completely, that's as high as it could go for on-site, on upland disposal. And that's saying that it's contaminated.
If it's contaminated.
If it's contaminated, that number.
And we had a time frame, Bill, for when we would know that, the 6 to 12 months? Or was that just the permitting part of it, was 6
That's
to
the
12
permanent
months?
part of it, they will take the samples. Right now, we have a request into Army Corps of Engineers and DEP. Problem is, Army Corps is furloughed. DEP and Army Corps have worked so closely. DEP knows what Army Corps wants. We should be able to get that back. And it's just, where do we take the samples? We don't get to choose, our consultant doesn't get to choose. DEP in joint with Army Corps gets to pick where those sites are.
And that, that portion is 11 to 18 months.
The dredging.
This,
Permitting.
the permitting,
Permitting.
yeah.
Plus, you have to go to Concom, right? Gonna have to get on what we can do.
Yeah, but that, once the state signs off, you're,
So one of the things that we've talked about with this is, you talk about that sort of investment, where do the funds come from? And Bill has made us aware that the state has some pockets of funding for this
there's
sort of
Mass
work.
Works money that is available for dredging within certain harbors. Seaport Council. I mean, there are small ones. This isn't a huge project, so our desire would be able to piggyback with somebody else in the river that is looking to do dredging.
So the other thing about it is, though, you have to have so-called shovel-ready projects. And so without knowing whether we can, how realistic this is, it's the reason that our committee recommended, and the select board and the planning board supported the continued use of master plan funds, nearly $50,000 towards this waterside engineering work. To see if we can answer some of the questions to get ourselves closer to shovel-ready.
You can't apply until the shovel ready.
But it will take, there is some additional work that might be required of Childs before being shovel-ready, Bill, in terms of if there's a need to think about other investment in this to get us to shovel-ready. I think you said there was at least $3,000 in one of your
Oh.
emails.
There's, no.
No?
Part of the Chapter 91 permit is a notice of intent with the local Concom. The filing fee for the notice of intent is $3,000 to the state. Because it's Chapter 91, the town is not exempt from that, no. Every other DEP filing, we're exempt from that fee.
So while we're talking about Army Corps and DEP and Concom, this is all area that's subject to Chapter 91 regulation?
Chapter 91 has to do with filled tidelands. Anywhere that the tide comes up and touches, if you're standing on a dock or a wharf and the water is lapping up, you're inside the filled tideland. That filled tideland, in this case, goes pretty close to where the FEMA line goes up. We have the water can go up here, the water has gone up here, this parking lot has gone underwater at 41, which is the long part of the boat ramp, long part of the parking lot down in here. This has an order of conditions. that goes with the Chapter 91 license. The order of conditions here issued by the Milton Concom states that there needs to be vegetation in there. It states what the vegetation type is, and it made the requirement that saltwater tolerant plants are in there. That's all part of the existing order of conditions.
Question, Richard?
Well, I have about 100. I'm just thinking, I mean, the whole project, you're looking at local money. Oh, sorry. So in the totality of this, you're talking some significant money. So you're talking money for improvements on land, money for the improvements on. So I'm thinking that one of the areas, in addition to state funds, and many communities have done this on water stuff, is public-private partnerships. So perhaps, like, if you're tying the bike path in, maybe get the DCR to pay for the public restrooms, you know, entering into agreements like that. Maybe get one major marina company, that's the name's supposed to be, just bought one of the
The MassWorks
marinas in
one,
Quincy.
but you could do the MassWorks one that would take care of the boat ramp, take care of the dredging, because it's providing access to the waterway.
And why just one additional dock? Why not more than one? I know Terry Driscoll had been, at one meeting I was at, Terry Driscoll had been there, and he had talked about
If you take the letter,
putting up along here.
Yeah, so that's where Charles looked at, and that's a lot more dredging up there.
Right, anything in there, I understand you'd have to dredge, but why just one dock? If you're gonna go to all this work, just why put one extra dock?
Well, it had to do with being efficient about the dredging in part. I mean, and the crew and the yacht club spoke amongst themselves about this kind of shared arrangement. And I see Bill Coughlin's here from the yacht club, and if he wants to speak to that at some point, I think he could. But I don't know if
I
anyone
think
from
there was
the crew is here.
another idea that was floated at one of the
Thank you.
meetings was to take that dock that's out at the end, that literally
Oops, sorry.
tees it off, and drag it, put it on one side or the other of the, if you were going to do, if you were only going to dredge within this place here, you'd put this over here, because these boats need deeper water would be here. If you're going to do the dredging that takes into account this whole area here, you can leave this here, the yacht club can get it that way, they can go that way, that puts the crew down here.
So one of the things that the crew had talked with a company, I think Row America, that can focus on the low dock. But there would really need to be some effort made to design a dock that worked for both, the boats and the yes.
For as much as I keep saying crew, it's not just a crew dock, it is a low
Kayak.
dock that can be used for kayaks, paddleboards. It becomes very difficult to take and climb out of a kayak when the dock is almost 9 to 12 inches above the water. Although it may make it nice and easy for the boat, it's not when you have something that you're down close to the water. Kayaks, canoes, stand-ups, or shells. So that particular type of dock, you can actually take a kayak and drive it onto it.
Cheryl, one other item on the second dock, or second location for a dock, I think one of the issues is that the yacht club has a certain number of moorings out there. And the second dock would very likely make that mooring move or eliminate it. And that
Out
would be
this way.
just a little bit further to the left. There's a mooring right there.
here.
So if there were a dock there, either the mooring or the dock wouldn't be usable.
Right,
And
so-
moorings are in short supply.
So there was a study that said look at down here for a low dock, look at over here for a low dock, and look at somewhere in here. And that's what it ended up being in here in the recommendations from MAPC. But in the further discussions amongst the parties, whether this was one of the locations that crew had shown us, if it ends up being next to it that way when it gets designed, the idea is that it's in the same location to save on the dredging, basically. This part, when the tide goes out, this part is mud sooner than this way. lack of technical terms, but that's,
There's a radiator laying in there that's been laying there for about 30 years. When the tide is low tide, you can see it laying there.
so this part of it, in terms of that water side, was just really, okay, we talked about, it's great, sounds great, but can you do it, right? So these are the steps we were taking to get to the answers of can you do it, and what will it take to do it. And it really, with the cooperation of the users, the current users of the water. And we've been, really trying to work to see if we can't get that seasonal use in there too. Because if we can get the occasional user, someone who can bring their kids down and take advantage of getting on the water even once in the summer, then we've increased our capacity. Yeah, one of the things about Crew is that they have told us that they can raise the funds to install a low dock.
Right.
And so there is a lot of interest on their part in doing so. So they participated in our meetings quite a bit. So that, in terms of funds, one of the other things we talked about was, how there's Friends of the Blue Hills or Friends of whatever place. There could be a Friends of Milton Landing. And that would be a place perhaps that even one idea in the zoning that still has to be fleshed out, and we'll see if we end up there in the final recommendations on that. But one idea is that you can, a private developer would be able to have a zoning kind of relief in part if they made a contribution to the improvements at the waterfront. So that was one idea of how to get a public-private partnership, is that you're allowing something with the developer, but they have to give something back. That's still being discussed, but it's another tool. And then there could be, the user fees for, depending upon how the leases go out in the future, maybe they could be dedicated to, an improvement fund here.
I agree.
So those are just some initial thoughts that people had about how it could be funded.
So is there any chance you could break this into like phases where so you have like the dredging's an issue, the docks are an issue, the on-land improvements? Because like let's say, and I just go back to the public restrooms, I just think of everyone that goes down there, especially like the farmer's market. If you could come up with a schematic and a cost for that, you may find someone that wants to do that for you. Like some of this, just as like you have an idea who may pay for the dock, maybe if you could put some dollar amounts on some of the specific items on this massive list, not on this project list, it might help.
So one of the things that...
Instead of looking at just one
Right.
big dollar figure,
Right.
just break it down
So in
and chip
term-
away at it.
So in terms of, we talked about the engineering aspects on the water side. We haven't talked too much about the next technical steps on the land side. But part of the technical steps are physical and part of them are legal and otherwise. On the physical part, there is a survey, but you would need a more detailed survey, and then you would need some civil engineering. So you would need to see, for example, what's involved in getting that to become storage. On these two new buildings, it would take, figuring out a little bit of how big those would need to be. And then I think, I'm sure Bill Ritchie could help apply a cost per square foot on those. Or between Bill and I, we probably could just get a ballpark anyway of what those would cost. But then other landscape improvements through here also, somebody to do a more detailed plan. So take these concepts and do a more detailed plan. Probably a civil engineer in conjunction with a landscape architect would be appropriate. So that would be sort of a next step on the land side. How do you get utilities? So we said, new electric and water. So where would that tap in, and how much that might that cost? And then even, on the historic markers and the wayfinding, that could be a fundraising effort in and of itself. You get the businesses in town or the institutions in town, and that becomes their marker. I'm familiar with, where my family is in Indiana, there was a private initiative to extend bike trails throughout the county. And they did it mostly through fundraising. And they got companies and others to donate trailheads and certain amounts to each one of them. And I think that might be an opportunity for at least some of that wayfinding and historic marker portions of it. But those are the steps. You know, there's still a number of steps to need to be taken. So on the letter after the sort of the dock aspects of it, we talked about optimizing storage on the land side, so that we could get a little broader participation in the waterfront in the summer. So for example, if there's something going on at the farmer's market, is there enough parking for that? Because we've heard that can become a challenge in the summer when there's an event with the farmer's market. And it's only once a week, but if they could use part of that land, which is now used for storage of cradles and trailers, for parking or for other, maybe that's a food truck that comes for this farmer's market, or maybe the farmer's market, they've told us they like to do cooking demonstrations if they had the utilities there. So some of that is what we just talked about in terms of the figuring out how big those facilities might be. And then the gravel area, we talked about this, but this was part of the interest in the way the boats are taken out. When they're taken out on cradles, they've needed this land area for maneuverability, and my understanding is that they won't need as much with this if this dock or this ramp is rebuilt. And then this reconfiguration to improve the aesthetic is something that the committee feels it supports. And then the seasonal use of that for the rentals that we talked about. The next one on the waterfront operations is a real question. Who's responsible for managing this waterfront, right? Right now, the yacht club was given certain responsibilities and obligations in their lease, and they've worked with crew and other users there. But if we want to have this sort of be a waterfront, how are we going to do that? Who's going to manage it? So that's not something we delved into. We identified it as something that really needs some discussion. But we really felt that there's such a asset, and that just to use it for storage of cradles and trailers in the summer was not taking full advantage of it. And so if there's a way to work that reconfigure these things such that that's not necessary for the yacht club anymore, we felt that would really be advantageous to the town. Again, the town is going through the permitting of the dock, but questions arise that, who owns the dock? Who's required to maintain the dock to take it in and out? Who's required to maintain the structures? Who's required to maintain the parking lots? Some of that is included in the permits that exist there. It's spelled out in the special permit for 88 Wharf, and it's spelled out in the Chapter 91 requirements and in the lease with the yacht club, but it could be an opportunity when the lease for the yacht club goes out for RFP to reconsider how that responsibility falls. And so the next steps, again, these 5 items came right from the report, and a lot of them are similar to what we just discussed before, so we refer back to that. And I've commented on some of these already: the marine engineering, the surveying, the civil engineering, the landscape architecture, the historic building. We understand that the historical commission has been in touch with you, and you folks have been working on that.
We expect it any day. That's the first step.
Right. Stabilizing that building,
Yes.
obviously, is a necessary first step. And then, really important, again, kind of hitting home on this, clearly defined relationships for current users and future users, so that it's clear who's responsible. A lot of questions have come up to us in this process about that. And then on the, I mentioned the vitality of the village and possibility of some parking, overflow parking for that. Part of what we've discussed is in the zoning part, which is again not the focus of tonight, but some historic structures have no capacity to add parking. So if we want to encourage restoration of those structures, figuring out a way to help them achieve their parking requirements is a way that might help them be able to preserve those buildings. Right? So that's just something for consideration. So partnerships and collaboration. We've talked about the immediate stakeholders. There are stakeholders beyond in Milton Village and then beyond and in the town who want to take advantage of the waterfront. The parties, getting a joint meeting, but how do you get joint action moving forward, right? And then the regulatory and permitting portion of it is probably where the most complexity comes in. And we've touched a little bit on who the parties are and what some of the issues are. But really, there's going to need to be some legal work on that as well. But the idea is really, can we come to an agreement that this is worth doing, that, expanding the access to the waterfront, making it convenient for the existing users and getting other users on the waterfront to take advantage of this asset. And if we can all agree on that, then it might not be exactly this plan and it might not be exactly these recommendations. But the more continue to investigate, the more informed we are, then our view is it's worth doing the work. It's worth trying to get there. Even if it seems like, oh, it's very expensive, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, are we ever going to get there? But it seems to us anyway, to our committee and to the people who've expressed support to us that this is worth doing. So, Liz, Tabor, Dick, Katie, have I represented our
Well done, nice job, Cheryl, wonderful.
Well, on behalf of all of us, we thank you, because I know how much you've put in on this. This has been, I think, before I got on the board, this existed, so. I've said publicly many times, having just personal fished there with my father grew up right where Shaw's is, Rochester, and I fished there, smelt fished when I was a kid. But fishing was so popular there that you had to fight for a spot at night. You couldn't even, on the wharf there, you had to fight to get a spot along the wall. But anyone who's gone down there, whether you've walked the bike path, gone on the water, kayak, canoed, I've done them all on a power boat as the Yako people have. It's clearly a jewel, it's an underutilized jewel. I think it's definitely something that will truly enhance, we always talk about enhancement of town, and I look at just the front page of today's Times once more, and way before Elaine's time, how many times a photographer has gone down to that town landing to take a picture, to make, a beautiful picture, to use it for something representing the town of Milton. If you saw today's picture was the picture of the harvest seal that's on one of your floating, I tell you, that's one of your winter logs to one of your moorings that's floating. Yeah. So, at least for me, I get that, and I know how hard you've all worked on this, and I think it's incumbent upon us to try and codify it, chip away at it. I mean, Michael knows, I sit in here on Wednesday's Capital Improvement Committee, and it's a daunting task when you see the money things but I just see there are so many entities and interests in this that just chipping away at it, I don't see it as insurmountable at all. I think it could, even things as simple as like new electric and water for the farmer's market area and a bike rack. those are small little things that, I mean, you could probably do it in a couple days, just, so,
You asked if we had to do it all at once, and the answer is no.
no.
There's many, many small projects that can be broken up with multiple sources of funding.
Can I just ask, so in terms of the recommendations?
He's only got 19 questions.
Yeah, no, just one with 4 parts. So.
You thought I was kidding? No, it was canceled today. That was canceled.
So the.
Let her get her pen out first.
Yeah. So the one is, I just want to try to make sure I understand generally what the recommendations are. So is it fair to say that the 4 primary recommendations, and this is the 4 parts, the 4 primary recommendations are the new low-height dock, the storage facility, reconfiguring the gravel area, and the boat ramp, which is under the 4 key findings. And that's kind of my shorthand. One is the dock, the low-height dock. 2 is kind of the storage facilities that you talked about. 3 is the gravel area, and then 4 is the boat ramp. And then I know there's a lot of different components, but are those the basic 4, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, the ramp and sort of ties to the operations, the whole operations of that, right? Because the way they take the boats in and out now involves a certain amount of land area that is not required if we do this ramp.
Right.
So it does free up land. So it really is like a waterfront. So I guess
And
you
you
could
do
call
other
it the
things.
ramp, but it
Yeah.
allows you to do other things.
Do other things.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just thinking about what actually has to be done in order to, the big ticket items to kind of free up the land, if you will. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the lower dollar, I think, enhancements on the signage, on the wayfinding, on the historic plaques, that sort of thing, are independent of those larger ticket items. It's just, if you think about many lovely places that you've been where you've seen that sort of thing, I mean, you can envision that this is one place that could benefit from it.
And is the dredging part and parcel of the low-height dock? I mean, is that a
It's really
precondition?
required for the current dock.
See how you could
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's because of how much, I guess, the silt has built up over time.
Another item we have to, at some point, deal with as a town is what to do with the lockup. I think right now, it needs repair, and also, we need a tenant. Right now, the yacht club has been there, the tenant at will for almost 4 years. So we have one of these situations where we're watching a building that we know needs work now, both from 2 separate examinations by I think an architect, it was an engineer for the Milton, from the Milton Historic, as well as another engineer who went in and took a look at it for the town, and they both come up with pretty much the same agreement that the thing needs some work. Now, we know a couple of things. It's not going to get done on its own, and it's not going to get cheaper if we wait. So I think as we tie all this stuff in, it has to be, that's first and foremost. That's an historic building. I don't think there's any way we can sort of kick that can down the road. And the second piece of it is, we have to figure out who is this tenant we're going to have in the yacht club. I mean, in the lockup.
Did it even have a cell? I asked that as a second check. I don't know if it even had a cell.
I've never been
in it.
inside.
So I don't know. I've been in it. I think even in my life, I don't think I knew anyone who ever worked there before my time. My father's
There's still
just,
some bars in the windows, though.
yeah. Those are, so I think, Katie, we just wanted to get through this, and then we're gonna start to take that up on our end. I recently had a conversation, just briefly, with Mayor Joe Sullivan in Braintree, because he's in a similar situation. They have 2 parcels with 2 buildings on the Fall River, both on town land, similar type thing, both leased to yacht clubs. So they're a little bit bigger than the Milton Yacht Club is, but I just wanted to kind of pick his brain and see how he was dealing with it. It's the exact same thing. Buildings are on town land, the docks are on town water, so.
I think it's just a tough situation for the yacht club to be sitting there on
I get it.
on
I
a
get it.
month-to-month lease, and then at the same point, we're sitting there looking at this building, and we're saying to other people in the town, hey, there might be an 18-month moratorium, and you're doing something to your home if it's historical, and here's a piece of property that we control, and we're trying to figure out, it's expensive. I don't think there's any doubt about it, but what to do with it.
So one of the things, if you thought about what you would need to do in order to get to an RFP and to a lease, is you'd have to come up with an area in which would be the area which is allowed to be used in that lease, right?
Right.
And you'd have to come up with, how the waterfront's going to be managed, which is, those are really sort of not necessarily engineering kinds of things, but they're really more operational side of thing, which it just takes some, as you said, some research and some thought. And then if there was long-term planning to get to larger improvements, then that could somehow be included in some way in terms of your lease, so that you could solve a short-term lease problem by go ahead and, you could be made part of the RFP too in terms of how improvements would be done. I think one of the things we've heard from the yacht club is that their ability to commit to making any improvements when they're on a tenant at will basis is difficult. So, if an entity had a 10-year lease, where they could potentially help raise some funds for some improvements, that could be achievable, but it's difficult when you have a short-term operation.
So, on Wednesday, I listened to just a brief summary from Bill Ritchie, who was our Consolidated Facilities Director, who took part of it, because in essence, it's the same as the MAC. It's a town building. It's
Right.
And I believe he said he'd never been in it. That was the first time he'd ever even been in it. So he was unaware that there was rent. So that's the reason we have consolidated facilities. I think we have to pull it under the umbrella. However we do it going forward, it's a town building. Like he said, you bring me down and I'm gonna be responsible for something I didn't even know about. So I hear that, and Bill's very proactive, and he's taken us leaps and bounds, and from the schools to the town side to everything. So I think from that aspect, it just somehow fell through the cracks there, but I think we have to address it going forward. Because even in things like, one of the things that we're lucky in this is that it's such a historic building. It may be actually, is it the oldest? I don't know if that's the oldest, or one of the fire stations,
don't
one of
think
the
it's the
oldest.
Fire
oldest.
station's older.
Yeah.
Fire
That's
stuff, so,
1912.
but it's up there. It's,
I thought we were waiting for Bill Ritchie to give us some estimates on some of the lower hanging fruit or the smaller repairs.
yeah, I don't think it was the small, he's giving us the big. It's
the
he was talking the big the other day, but that's.
Having looked at this myself, with an architect on the Historical Commission, and seeing the green things growing out of the brick, water's in there and water damage, and if you're talking about, that's a big thing, but that's the thing that's going to preserve the building, is to repair the masonry, repair the gutters, repair the roof, and it's going to take investment to do it.
Bill said the same thing.
Because, you can, all right, the window sills are one thing, the damage to the windows, those are one thing, but that's not going to make the building. The engineer who, when I looked at it, said that wall is bowing out. So it becomes a structural issue if the wall is bowing out. So anyway, my architect guidance is to consider that part, the sooner rather than later.
I think what we were told by the chair of the Historical Commission when they came in, I don't know, July or August or last summer, was that if it gets on the Mass Historic District list, then there's grants available for some of that work.
Bill said the same thing, and I think, Bill's very aggressive at chasing grants of all types. These are probably newer ones to him on this, but I think he understands that, because thinking the same way you are, I think sooner versus later is what we want to do this before it gets to the point like where we are at Governor Stoughton, where we have buildings that are beyond, they're just in such.
Bill and I discussed this building yesterday. He has the preliminary numbers, now he just has to put it together. And the
Big
question
and
comes-
small, both big and, like Katie said, the small stuff as well as the big stuff?
He's piecing all these together. He has what the small ones cost, he knows which pieces. The question's going to be, are you going to do the whole building, or are you going to, you have rotted roof boards, you're gonna fix those. Are you going to take out your entire roof and put new slate to it, or are you going to patch the front with stuff that came out of the back? Are you going to make it usable, livable, and okay, or are you trying to go to the standards that are going to be required of that particular grant? If you go towards that grant, you're gonna spend money.
Well, if you're,
Because to be deemed a historical
right.
building, you have to make those fixes in a particular way. I was at the Historical Commission meeting last night, and they are working on that now, so.
But part of it too, I mean, this gets into the detail and weeds a bit, is, but brick and mortar from that era is different than brick and mortar from today's era, and they don't interact well together. So it's really important to use the right mortar mix, to have the mix tested, because it absorbs water, and if they don't do it the same, you can get cracking, and that's what gets water in, and that
That's
gets
why it's fault.
more damage,
Right.
and,
Right now, the building is built with sand mortar, and it's red sand mortar.
right. Yeah.
Sand mortar was built in that era because the building could actually move. If the earth moved, the building moved, and you didn't see it. If you were to take and use build the same building, make it the same way, and put in mortar for today, and there was some movement like that, you'd see the cracks. You'll see the cracks, and the fire station out back has a couple of those cracks, and we fixed them last winter.
This fire station.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of brick buildings that when they came in and they mortar in the last 50 years, you'll see that there's little cracks that develop in that mortar. Whereas the old stuff, Faneuil Hall's built the same way. It's sand mortar. That's why you don't see those stress cracks going up that building.
I have a question. Do we think that even with the historical designation and we apply for these grants, do we think the grants that we would receive or could receive, what length of time do we think it would take to get those grants? And would they be sufficient to do all the things that need to be done?
Steve did tell us, he did say that.
They have a deadline coming up very soon
March
for
22nd.
March 22nd.
In my memory was, it was significant, he was talking the possibility of some significant money that you could get for it.
But there still would be, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there still would be some.
Oh, buy-in from
some-
whatever,
some
yeah, yeah.
town responsibility on this in terms of funds. So we wouldn't be looking at the Mass Historical Commission, assuming we get into this queue. And I'm guessing there would be a queue in terms of these types of funds, because I can see all sorts of towns,
Right.
as you just said, like it could be Braintree or Weymouth, it could be anybody going after these funds, getting into that queue, and then getting chosen for an amount, and then we have to figure out what's the town's responsibility to come up with. So I think people should realize there is gonna be some monies that are gonna have to be spent. And what I always get concerned about these types of things is that if we're talking about leasing something out, I wanna have something to lease out.
The grants from the Mass
I agree,
Historic Commission.
I agree with you.
Are reimbursement, so you have to pay for it, and then you get reimbursed.
A lot of our stuff is like that now,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
And it's
lot
a
of our
50,
stuff
I
is
think
like
it's a
that.
50% match.
50% match.
50 is
So
better
if
than
you're
zero.
talking about
Yeah, I know.
replacing those windows and you're doing it, to historical standards, it's a lot of money.
And you can apply more than once for the same structure, so,
I think he said that as well. I
Right.
think Steve said that as well.
right.
I do think when I came in, to your point, Dick, they were talking about emergency fixes because they would be needed to get us into that time frame. So we would,
Right.
so we'd survive the
Exactly.
queue. So I think that, to Kay's point, there were these small things that were kind of emergency fixes,
Mhm.
and then that would lead to give us time for the bigger ticket items. I think that's my memory of what.
Yeah.
Steve-
So
You're not going to get money for the planning aspect of it,
Right.
but you'll get money for the implementation part.
So the important part is to, whatever the temporary fix is, not to have it to do any harm by being modern technology, quick fix that causes historic damage.
I think Bill got that as well.
Yeah.
Consolidated Facilities has a budget every year for capital items, small ticket capital items
Sure.
throughout the town buildings, so once Bill gets these numbers, works with Bill to put something together, then we'll probably have a sense of whether they can do anything to this building
Mhm.
on an emergency, short-term, small item basis.
Good.
Do we want to get to anyone else before we put a question?
Go ahead.
Who's
You've got-
first?
you've got a
I
list.
have, I know, I already know. I'll begin with you, Mr. Bork. You're the first name on the list. If everyone could just come up, state their name, their address, and hold the microphone up to you. Is there anyone else who hasn't signed? I have 3 names. Is that everyone here? Mr. Toma, anything tonight? Lee, any, okay.
I just have a question versus.
So you can come up at that, yeah. Okay, is that all right? Because we want to get it on tape. For the thousands of listeners, I think millions of listen, there isn't a week that goes by now that I am sure how many people watch these meetings, so I'm impressed. As I said this at the ULI the other day, you heard me say, you can never find apathy in Milton. Whether it's something that
True.
people go to, or they watch it on TV, they care, so that's a good thing. Mr. Bourne.
Okay, so my name is Michael Burke, and I'm a 14-year resident at 88 Wharf Street. I'm a 2-time chairman of the Condominium Trust. I am a member of the Milton Yacht Club, and I'm a member of the Milton Village Neighborhood Association. Many of my comments are going to incorporate those 3 stakeholders tonight. They're certainly in the audience to contradict me. I was concerned tonight that you probably would like to hear some specifics from us, so I started to put some together. And then I had an email failure, so that when folks responded with their comments, I got none of them. So I'm going to hand out a document that's imperfect. It I think, is the broad brush of what we want to talk about, but there certainly is more. So I put an initial of the date in the corner so that you can tell when something more accurate or more complete comes out. So maybe starting at the top, much of this presentation has been around the needs of Milton Crew. And we participated in this process, which is close to 2 years. And there's been a lot of back and forth. And some of us developed some frustration. So the Yacht Club and 88 Wharf and Milton Crew met and talked through our perceived differences and found out that they weren't that great. So I can tell you that we have a plan for use of the land, which we're going to implement this spring, that takes away a lot of the angst of other folks from outside of the neighborhood. So what are those issues? During the summer, we allowed the Milton seniors to put their shells along the walkway, which certainly improved the situation for them. For the youths, we're going to allow those shells to come up out of the farmers market area and be placed behind the Milton Yacht Club on land that is actually owned by 88 Wharf Street. And then the Milton Yacht Club and Milton Crew have agreed to put an extension on the existing dock, which is going to accommodate the low height need for the shells. So, that kind of urgency has been dealt with. It's going to take place in the spring. Starting with my bullets, I thought maybe you may want to take notes. We see this as one neighborhood. We can't divide it into those are the village people and we're the landing people. What happens to them happens to us and vice versa. And the best example of that is traffic. You do something along Adams Street, it's affected us on Wharf Street. You've got more people coming out of Wharf Street, it's affecting the folks on Adams and High Street. So it's one neighborhood to us. We have developed a lot of conviction around this being a historic neighborhood. It's, I think, Milton's most important historic neighborhood. There's more age there and more history there than any other place, and we really want to see it respected. It's all intertwined, whether it be the park, which we've learned is an Olmsted-designed park, the lockup, which has been there for a lot of years, the very rich housing stock that even some of us were naive to until we started to hear who the original occupants were and the ages of these houses. They're very important buildings. And then, of course, there are other older buildings, the Associates building, which is a lovely building, but not the same as signing the Suffolk Resolves right then and there. There's been talk about putting up historic markers to mark these places, and I hope that Milton doesn't become a town of markers, that there used to be history here, but it's all gone because we have markers today. And we want to preserve what's left, and we feel very, very strongly about this. I'm going to jump over the traffic study for a minute and go to number 4, which is, there needs to be respect for the existing stakeholders. Dick, like you were saying, it's a small gem. It really is a small gem, but the word small has to go there too. So it can't accommodate everybody's wish. It's got to have some test of reasonableness. And I think, start with the existing stakeholders. And I've called it a neighborhood. We at 88 Wharf Street really value the yacht club, and not because I once had a boat there, I do not any longer. They provide a level of security on that waterfront that is very important. And I don't want to get into a tirade about sex and drugs, but they're down there and they're watching and they're helping us, and that's important. Let me just see. We are very concerned if you start to introduce non-water dependent users, and particularly if you take the first permanent easement, which is along the water. It's written in a way that is very specific, that it's supporting water dependent uses. It's not to have parking for MBTA or overflow parking from Adams Street, and that's already in writing. We really don't want to see food trucks, at least not on that land, or vehicle charging stations. Why would we want to diminish the needs of the yacht club to create something like a vehicle charging station that in high tide is going to flood anyway? So I think you have to be realistic. And even when we talked about public restrooms, do you really want to spend money to fix something that's not broken? Let me give you an example. So when the farmers market is in session, the Milton Yacht Club makes the building available to the employees, okay, not to the general public. Although there have been exceptions when there's a little kid that really has to go, it's taken care of. The yacht club had offered keys to crew for their folks to use it, but the crew folks really don't want teenage kids in a building that can close doors, and they've said thank you very much. Something to keep in mind is everything at the waterfront is on a sewer system that is ours, 88 Wharf Street, and our sewer ejector system. So, in other words, to get sewage uphill, there's ejector pumps. If those pumps ever go down, an entire building goes down. So that if there's any lack of supervision of these new restrooms and feminine products get into them, the sewer ejectors are down. So we have great concern. The town certainly has the authority to do what they want, but let's not make our building not habitable. We really want to see that RFP for a lease of the lockup in the property go out. We'd like to see it with the same square footage as it is today. That portion of 25 Wharf and the boat storage area. We love the yacht club, and if some of the people from High Street and Adams Street want to also tune in. Fact is, the other night, Mike, I don't know his last name, the developer,
Roberts.
talked about how nice it is to be able to come down to the waterfront and sit there on what he calls the veranda, and the whole ambiance of the yacht club. And I know that there have been some voices that have said, there were people at 88 Wharf Street that really are unhappy with the yacht club. Well, we created a task force to be able to work parallel with this committee. And I chair it, and some of my members are here. Some of the people who are here are also board members. And we can tell you that the vast majority of the folks at 88 Wharf Street not only enjoy the yacht club, they want to see it stay. And when I say that, it's in a very emphatic way. And again, we go back to the history. The yacht club is intrinsic to the history of the waterfront. They are the last vestige of the seafaring that has gone on along here. They are a 501c3 nonprofit. It's not like we have Russo Marina down there. And, Milton Cruise, also a 501c3, actually the proper name being the Neponset River Rowing Association. So if we can be kindly towards Milton Crew, I think we can be kindly towards Milton Yacht Club. We certainly are looking to get your support on that. We now know that we have this little gem out there, the Olmsted Park. We've seen photographs. It's not as pretty as it once was. However, the bones are still there. We'd love to see it restored and be something the town would be proud of. I mean, any other town would be happy to say that they have an Olmsted-designed park. And then beyond that, we do get into the traffic issues. There have been traffic studies, shall I say, many, many times. And each time it comes back and says that there is an issue on Adams Street and Adams and Wharf Street, and the town has not taken appropriate action. There's a new traffic study. we want to do more than just wish that something's going to happen this time. We want something to happen. We'd like to see lights installed, as has been recommended. There were 2 parking spaces that make it extremely dangerous when you pull off of Wharf Street onto Adam Street. Marilyn can tell you tonight how long we had to wait, and we joked about if there were a light up the street, we could have pulled out by now. But I've pulled out and nearly been hit. Nobody slows down coming down the hill. As a matter of fact, it seems to be a sport. You step on the gas when you're coming down the hill, no matter whether somebody's there at Wharf Street or not. We had a stop sign that would make folks coming out of the MBTA parking lot stop, and we have a lot of dog walkers, and that sign was removed by the town. We've been asking for it to be replaced. It has not happened. Similarly, trucks, we get a lot of service trucks that come to 88 Wharf Street, whether it be for the restaurant or you cannot believe the package deliveries that we get, and they make the turn and they step on the gas because, it's a wide open road, just come charging down the hill. We'd like to see a speed bump there, and we know they're not popular, but it's Little Wharf Street, and I think we could accommodate Little Wharf Street. So those are some of our major issues. We'd like to see some police surveillance along Adam Street, and here's the reason why. You know how as you come down the hill and you can make a left onto Elliott Street, it sort of becomes 2 lanes? Well, what they've started to do is way up on the hill, they get in the second lane. So those of us trying to come out of Wharf Street, it's sort of double jeopardy. The first car doesn't get you, the second one is, and you don't see him pulling out behind the other one and coming over. We think a little police surveillance there, you give a few tickets, you stop some folks, and maybe there could be some improvement. And who knows, maybe the traffic folks have better suggestions than that. I don't want to stray into the issues of Adams and High Street tonight. They're on this list.
You wrote 5 minutes, you're at 15 so far.
Well, I don't want to take advantage either. I mean, you can certainly read them there. It's our neighborhood. We don't want to not welcome other folks. As a matter of fact, we do. We have that walkway, along the front of our property. We love it. We'll share it, but let's not destroy it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions? Go ahead.
No, well, go ahead, Mike, and then I just want to give a little bit of update on the traffic, that's all.
And I apologize for my ignorance on this, but have you all gone to the Traffic Commission on these points?
We went to the town administrator.
Okay, so it may be something to go to the Traffic Commission.
Yeah.
Because that's usually the process for these kinds of improvements. The Traffic Commission reviews them, and then,
Yeah.
as I understand it, and then it comes to the Board of Selectmen to consider them, so.
Point well taken.
So I think, I just want to add on the traffic, because we did, our committee met on Monday, and we're going to draft a letter, also similar to the Wharf study letter on the traffic. I think there were 2 traffic studies done, a part of this Wharf and zoning, so not particularly exclusive to one or the other. The first one identified the existing conditions and how to make some improvements. The second one looked at if you implemented the overlay zoning that MAPC had recommended and the build-out analysis they had done, what impact might that have? And then there were suggestions for mitigation. In the first one, identified, like Michael said, that there had been several times that a traffic light was recommended for the intersection of Canton Ave, Randolph Ave, and Adams Street. And in fact, when I went through and was looking at the traffic study from when the 88 Wharf was permitted, it was part of what was recommended then. But it wasn't installed, and we don't have to go into all the reasons why, but it's still recommended. It's a major recommendation. And then another major issue that was identified by the traffic engineer is that we need to work with Boston, because the traffic light across the river in Boston, just like we have in other parts of town in Canton, the traffic light there impacting Route 138. Here we have it impacting coming down Adams Street. And so we know that Mike Dennehy, town administrator, has already reached out to Boston and is talking with them. And then thirdly, on the traffic side, the engineer recommended some changes at the intersection of Elliott and Adams Street, which would the way the pedestrian lights work, it cuts off all movement of cars at the time, and he had some ideas about how to improve that. And then also supports the neighbors in removing the 2 parking spaces on the left coming out of Wharf Street. And there may have been a few other things, so those are the highlights that I have off the top of my head. So we're going to put those in a recommendation letter with the backup of the 2 reports and ask the select board to take those up and move those forward. And Mike, maybe that's a good thing for the Traffic Mitigation Committee.
Actually, those points probably should go to the
Traffic
Traffic Commission.
Commission.
Traffic
Go to the
Commission,
Traffic Commission,
okay.
then it comes to us.
So
Okay.
just to follow up on 2 things. So on the stop sign, because I see there's a new crosswalk here.
4-way stop.
Right, so one of the things, to meet the, people don't realize, and I said this often when I was chairman of the Traffic Commission, and I'm sure Chase says it now, you have to meet the state criteria to have, you can't just put a stop sign up. For some reason, that rings in my head is why that stop sign is not there anymore. Because if you put one up that doesn't meet the criteria and someone gets hurt, the AG has been very clear, that community is at fault. The same with, like, when you said to me, a speed bump, where did you say it?
Along a wharf as you come down the
So,
hill.
no speed bumps on declines or upgrade, because one of the dangers is when you put in a speed bump or speed hump or raise of any type. So think about, we're gonna get 12 inches of snow, it's Sunday, you're coming in, someone's coming down, they can't stop, they go over it. So that's one of the dangers. You have to have a very designated line of sight with raised levels on. But the third one, you talk about the satellites, and I've said this before, this even this goes back to when I think, I don't even know who was chief. There was, that whole intersection was gonna get, that was all gonna happen. It was all engineered, and the residents didn't want it, and it was.
46, 99,
Yeah,
2002.
and it was, so that definitely was, from a traffic management and a safety point of view, from this town's, they felt that, said they saw that a long time ago, and I agree with you, it hasn't gone away today.
Right, right.
And the neighborhood maybe would change their mind.
Maybe,
Because it's gotten so.
okay, anybody else, anyone else? Go
Would
ahead.
you indulge me one piece of information that I think both the selectmen and the select board and the parks commissioners would find of interest? So we've had some healthy exchanges, and one of them has been over, the Chapter 91 license and the special permit, et cetera. So Marilyn Myers and I have been working with our attorney, Ned Corcoran, who of course is everybody's attorney.
Don't tell Marion that.
And we've been going through those documents, and we're coming back
You have
with,
to have humor in all cases, go ahead, I'm sorry.
with basically a one-pager of who's responsible for what. And then we would like to sit down with, I don't know if it's the parks commissioners or the park director, but we'd like to engage the town. And I'll give you an example. So if you follow the seawall that's along 44 Wharf, which is now 88, 25 and 41 wharfs, the seawall in the worst condition belongs to the town.
It's true.
And there was a day when it's going to topple, and it's close, and we're simply going to make a phone call and tell you your wall's in the water because it's not our checkbook. And so we want to have it very clear up front whose responsibility is whose, in an amicable way. We're going to sit down with the yacht club also, so that there's no doubt, and we'd just like to get it all on the table. So if you want to let me know who wants to have that conversation, we'd be happy to have that conversation.
We will soon.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks
thank
very
you.
much. And thank you all, because this has been a lot of work and a lot of give and take.
And thank you, Michael. Michael's been at most of our meetings, and we've had vigorous debate, but I think we've remained civil in our vigorous debate.
I will tell you this, though, we tried this last year, you bringing that Wahlburgers truck down to Lowell Mills for 10 minutes. There'll be a line coming out of the residents of 88 Wharf going to buy from it, I'm just telling you. You may not think so, but I
No,
saw the proof.
We know
is
they're
in
not going to be going to the restaurant, so the truck will be the draw.
The proof is in the pudding.
That would be a good restaurant, actually.
Okay. Marilyn, you want to come next?
Hi, my name's Marilyn Myers. I live at 88 Wharf. I lived there for 7 years. Before that, I lived on the other side of Milton for 25 years. Is that all I'm supposed to say?
It's more than enough. All right, now raise your right hand.
So if we had a technical glitch, because we saw you guys 2 nights ago, and we were trying to put our items together, but Michael didn't get my email, so I have to read. He couldn't put my things on what he just gave you. So I would like to re-emphasize that really, truly, the vast majority of residents at 88 Wharf, which we think is about 130 people, totally endorse the yacht club being there on the waterfront. We find them to be good neighbors. It's very interesting. I have a unit that faces right out to the yacht club. And we like seeing the changing scenery, the boats going in the water in the springtime, seeing the boats floating on the river, and then watching them take the boats out in the fall. And we don't mind looking at the storage boats because it makes sense that that would be a boatyard right next to the river. It's also been there for over 100 years. So we really do have strong feelings about keeping the yacht club where it is. And to that end, we really would like to request that you put out the RFP as soon as possible, because as you've already said tonight, the yacht club has been hanging on a month-to-month lease for 5 years. So it's a disservice to them to not let them know one way or the other what's going on. So we would like to see you take action on that. We want to know who our neighbor's going to be. This space that you're looking at is our front yard, and we want to know who's going to be out there, and if it's not going to be the yacht club for some reason, we want to know who it is going to be. And we think as the most significant, what's the word we all use?
Butter.
Well, that.
Stakeholder?
Stakeholder. I mean, we really are, number-wise and tax dollar-wise, we're the most significant, and we just think it would be nice if we knew what you're going to do in our front yard. And towards that end, and you've already said this, so I'll just say it quickly, the new boat ramp with the fancy lift thing, in the sequence of events, that has to happen first in order to get rid of the cradles and the trailers. So that would have to be a priority. And you've already talked about fixing the lockup. Everybody in the building loves the lockup. It's beautiful, it's historic, it's a nice site. So it would be nice to get that fixed. In order for the yacht club to continue, it needs to maintain the amount of storage space on land, the square footage. They have about 15,000 square feet of boat storage space, some on our land, some on town land, but they need to keep that to keep functioning. Would like to recommend no commercial, non-water dependent uses. I think Michael just said that. No overnight parking in the waterfront spaces, which is actually already prohibited. No commuter parking in those spaces, and would rather not see car rentals going down on the waterfront. I think that's everything on my list. So I just wanted to be specific. You were asking the other night for
I think that's really
specific
helpful.
nuts and bolts, things that can actually be done.
But we just, so the boards know, we had asked, because we were reviewing our final language on the recommendations, and people didn't have a chance to see it. We talked about it. We said, if you have comments, send them to us in writing too, because it's good to have the record of it. So those may still come in, and we'll pass those along. There were other comments along the way, but you can see it's been a progress. So we can put a whole notebook together of all of that if you're interested in having it. But the most recent ones, we did want, because there was a short time between these meetings, an opportunity for people to submit further comments.
That it?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I guess this would be a
The committee,
legal,
you can ask anything you want.
a legal question in terms of a formal clarification of what would constitute a lease that the town could enter into with a lessee. Is it, I've heard from Michael and others a number of times, certainly, about long-term leases, and I'm a little confused as to what that term is, and I think I might not be the only person. So if someone could give me, how long can we go out for a lease? I understand we can add, I think, 1 or 2 years after the formal term. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years?
Well, it's at least 10 because the MAC has a 10.
so I can answer that, right, because I looked at theirs yesterday.
Okay.
They have a 10-year lease, so it's at least 10.
That'd go through town meeting.
But
Milton
it's-
Arts Center.
Yeah, I think it's after three, more than three has to be town meeting.
Town meeting?
So I
Three,
think-
three can be done by the selectmen.
Right.
Anything over 3 goes to town meeting.
So conceivably, I mean, if there are tens, I don't know that you couldn't do a 99, for example, a 99 if you get town.
Well, that's
Right.
sort of what I'm
Right.
getting at, because we get into these situations.
You need to stay for 99?
You need, yeah.
Over, okay.
I don't know why you do.
So that's why I wanted to talk to Mayor Sullivan, because he has 2.
Yeah.
He's in the same boat, and I wanted to kind of see what his thoughts were, how he's doing it.
Because we're thinking about, if we're going to, let's say the yacht club is a winning bidder, and then we, as part of the lease agreement, you'd have some sort of stipulations in there actually requiring them as lessee to do certain things to the building.
Right.
I think the longer the lease, the longer the pay for, so to speak. So, but I think we have to make that clear, because I've heard different definitions by different people. I've heard 5 with two 1-year extensions. I've heard 10 tonight, and I think I've seen 99-year leases. I just don't know where I've seen them. But,
So,
Like, what does the Kidder have? What does he have at the Kidder? Like, what's the lease for that?
I don't know.
What's his, I wonder how long his lease is.
Yeah,
I think he's,
I think he's kind of well.
Is he really?
Well,
I think he's
yeah.
kind of well.
doesn't have long-term.
So I mean, to Dick's point, looking at a 25-year lease, then that would give them time to raise funds, and even if they wanted to, the loans, have time to pay it back. But if that requires a town meeting vote, I think that we should come up with a timeline to work with.
I think we can do it.
So one thing I'd like, sorry, Katie.
I just want to give some background at some point on why, because the park board is turned over, our board is turned over. It was a conscious decision in 2014, and I just so everyone is aware of the history on it. When that lease was expiring, we could have gone out to bid right away at that point, but with the park commissioners, the prior select board, 3-member board at the time, decided with the 3 park commissioners, we're going to let that expire, we're going to keep the yacht club in just a tentative will. This could go on for a while, but we want to develop a vision for this area. The master plan had just been concluding. Mr. Roberts was offering the Swift Hat Shop building to the town, which would have meant moving it down the hill.
I remember.
So it's not that, I mean, I keep hearing at all these meetings, well, it's been 4 or 5 years. It was intended that it was probably going to be a while, because it's going to, look how long it's taken to go through this process for the waterfront. So the idea was it was going to take some time to develop the vision, because every time this lease had been coming up, at least if you look back at the least 10 years before that, the file is replete with memos from former selectmen to former town administrators. We're looking to increase more public access at the waterfront. So that was a conversation that was happening every time the lease was coming up, but nothing was really being moved forward at that point. So that was really the goal, was that the park board and the selectmen, and we actually had all the stakeholders in at a selectmen's meeting. The park commissioners may have been there with us, I don't recall that, but whether they were or not. But Cheryl was at the meeting, and the master plan implementation committee had just been formed, and it was Cheryl's suggestion to the then select board, why doesn't the master plan implementation committee take this on? This is going to be a lot of work. It could be the first tangible project this committee gets involved in. And that's really how it wound up with our committee, and what's now coming back. But it was intentional that this happened, and that we play this process out for a little while, and we keep the yacht club as a tenant at will. No one specified 4 or 5 years, but I think the consensus of everyone at the time was this is going to take a while to go through the process.
Yeah, my comment wasn't meant to be a criticism of the process. I just said, just going forward, if we are going to go forward with some sort of lease, what would determine that lease be? And go back to the comment, what is a long-term lease? Well, what is the formal definition of that?
Well,
So, can I point something out?
go ahead.
One of the reasons why we felt the planning was necessary is if you look at the use of the land here, and you know that the parking here is restricted. If I'm a kayaker who wants to bring my kayak, or if I'm somebody else who wants to bring something to get onto the water, I can't really do it because I have no place to put my vehicle while I'm out on the water, right? So, because these...
So there's public parking there.
No, that's not true.
That's not true. Well, when I've been there, all of this is filled with vehicles, and this has service zone parking, and it has restricted hour parking, right?
Yeah, but 4 hours is 4 hours.
There's 3 spaces
I've watched
set
where
aside.
the
Whole gravel lots open.
So we could go,
go back to that. So the senior crew, when they come, they park right along here. They lost their show, They get out and they go.
All right, so I saw some people here, they were driving their vehicle with their kayak across here. There was very limited parking there. So the idea was, if you're going to have something, this is a private membership club, and that if you wanted to have somebody who wanted to have access to the waterfront, who didn't feel as if they wanted to join the club, that there would be also accommodation. That was part of the discussion, not trying to take away from what users are already there, but is there a way to manage this such that you can accommodate that additional user? So whether it would be here, the rental, or if it's somebody else who's not doing a rental to come in. So that was part of the discussion, that was part of the reason why we wanted to look at consolidating areas and not have these pieces everywhere. Because for somebody who's new, let's say you just moved to Milton and you go down there, there's very little signage and there's very little indication of what's public and what's private. And so it can look like a private facility. And so part of it is having to do with how it's organized and how it's managed, and part of it has to do with signage. But, you know, like some people might think that this park is a part of this property here, right? It's a little, is this parking part, this parking looks pretty much a part of this, but what about the parking here? Or what about this, do people know that this parking is available for some other use? The signage isn't clear on any of it. So it's very clear to people who use it every day, but it's not, really wasn't all that familiar with this when we started this, to be honest with you. And I went down there a lot of different times. I rode my bike down there. I watched when they were taking boats in and out, took video of it to understand how this whole place worked. So that's, in terms of when we look at when you're going to do a 10-year lease or a 15-year lease, and you're going to say that you're committing this land area to that use for 10 or 15 years, you're not going to have another opportunity potentially for another 10 or 15 years. That was why there was an opportunity to think about this in a big picture. It wasn't with an intent of one entity to have priority over another entity, but can you manage it more efficiently so that you can get better accommodation for those users and any other user on the water?
I don't think it's that hard to do.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Can you flip back to who owned, or who is responsible for what pieces of property?
Well, I think this was the ownership. It wasn't really the...
Property ownership, not responsibility.
Yeah, well, right.
You want to look at that big parcel?
The question is, and maybe it's a legalese question that can be talked about and worked out downstream, but we're talking about a lease with the yacht club that actually stretches over two different pieces of property. One is owned privately by 88 Wharf, and part of it's run and owned or managed by Park and Town. How does that reconcile the usage of space, overlaying that map with what the recommendation is from MPIC?
Right, so that's, we go back to, if we draw that line on here, that line is about here, where the parks is, right? And so that it comes back to, like we said, in terms of the operations and the management, is there some different relationship than what has been happened in the past, right? In terms of who's supposed to manage the ramp, who's supposed to manage the facilities. And there is this lease also, I understand, is up for renewal, so that's some other complication in terms of, I don't know if complication, it's just another issue to be resolved.
The lease between 88 Wharf
And the town.
Second easement.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
an easement, and I think
easement,
that's important, that it is
And
an
then-
easement.
Yeah, sorry, it's an easement. And then the other thing is that this is part of the special permit that allowed this to happen, and changes that, anything that affects their special permit come back to the planning board.
Well, isn't the number of units of parking space within that 88, wasn't that required to actually construct 88 Wharf, that
Yes.
that parking had to have
Yeah.
a certain amount?
And then I think the pieces that you're talking about, those 14 additional pieces that are currently used for boat storage, was originally offered by the developer of 88 Wharf to the town for year-round parking. The town deferred that, and they called it a license, and said, we'll use that, we want to not use it for year-round parking, but reserve that for water-dependent seasonal usage. We have two things we need definitions of, what is water dependent and what's seasonal. And I think we're missing that right now.
So just a little bit of history here. So for this entire piece of property from Wharf Street going in prior to 88 Wharf, so the entire town landing, the MBTA commuter lot, all of this had 0 parking restrictions. Nothing. There was no demand on the trolley. That lot was empty most days. There was no farmer's market. This was a storage plant for dead storage. It was a cold storage plant, that's what it
Right.
was. So there was really the only traffic down there was the minimal foot traffic that went up into this business district. And the tenants do it. One second, you can sign up and then, but so, and then as pressures changed, the T rented this out, which now is full every day. We had to restrict down here because people were always looking all over this entire, if you look at every single neighborhood that runs this entire track, everywhere you were finding people trying to park all day for free on either town property or private property and jump on the trolley and go for free. So that's how it all got regulated, and then the easements came when 88 Wharf was built. But this was all town, all on regular, you could park there all day long for years. Sure, you had a question.
I just wanted to clarify that the parkland, what you're that's now contiguous with 88 Wharf.
That was boats.
Was the boatyard.
That was boatyard, oh yeah.
And that was the part that was rented out in conjunction with the lease to the
Right.
yacht club. That was displaced as part of the construction project. And that's, the space that's now in the easement is equivalent square footage to what that park used to be, which is where the original boatyard was. So that's why the lease talks about a certain amount of square footage that the town doesn't own in that parking lot. It's to replace where the boatyard used to be.
So I found a folder of pictures in my basement the other day from 1986 of a resident that built a boat in his yard in Milton on, I think it was Lyman Road, and they moved it. Anyone who lived down there, it was the Crystal Inn was the name of it? It was, they moved it at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, closed Adams Street all the way, and there was a photographer, he gave me this, and this whole thing comes down the hill. There's nothing here, there's no boats here, it's all wide open. The boat's right here, and they put it in that cradle, and they launched it. And I found this whole folder of pictures of it the other day, so I get the history on it. Okay, Bill, you got lots, actually. Anyone else, last call? Bill, your friends used up all the time, you got 2 minutes. Michael starts kicking me under the table when he wants to.
I'll be brief, even though I'm Irish. Bill Coughlin from Milton Yacht Club, and thanks for having us and inviting us. And I'm just I took a few notes because a lot of the things I want to make sure got covered. What I would like to bring to everybody's attention, if you already haven't seen it, to gain a perspective of what it's like to put boats in the way the Egyptians built pyramids, is the Milton Cable Access Channel came down when we were hauling our Valhalla, which has been at the yacht club for 50 years and was built in the backyard of someone's house in Stoughton over a 4-year period, and was brought down on a tractor trailer and launched at the yacht club. She's been in the water now this will be her 53rd year this spring. But it's 26 minutes, and it's gives a lot of history of the club, a lot of history of the boat. There's pictures of the boat being built in the backyard, et cetera. And you kind of go see the process of what we go through to launch one of those monsters. But that being said, we're all getting older, and the key to this whole process, I know you were talking about the 4 things, I think you should reprioritize it, and the ramp basically is what is the linchpin to this whole process. Because no ramp, we still use the railroad car, we
Right.
still need cradles.
Right, I get it.
Cradles can't be brought anywhere else but on that property. The other thing that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, I wish we had known this was a planned thing not to have a lease, but no one ever told us that.
I can't speak to that. I know the town administrator was, at the time, I thought had spoken to the yacht club, but I thought.
We don't
the
hear
yacht
from
club
anybody.
wasn't. But I'm not sure who spoke to who at that time.
But to just, if you take a look at that land from the beginning of Wharf Street, from the gravel parking lot all the way down to Captain's Landing, we're responsible for cutting the grass, picking up the trash, disposing of the trash. We pay for that. The yacht club maintains and also donated to that waterfront area 5 picnic tables that we have that the public is more than welcome to use. We also have a grill that we've chained down there that if somebody says, hey, can I cook a hamburger? Go ahead. We use it once in a while after we go out on an outing, come back and have lunch, or when we're hauling the boats, we make lunch for ourselves. In terms of paying for the ramp, the Walter Timilty called me past summer and had a also conversation with Terry for the crew team. Walter put before the Mass Legislature a bond bill attached to another project in Milton. And the bond, when he talked to Terry and I, we kind of ballparked an estimate of $1 million to do that ramp work, cover some of the cost of the dredging in a new dock system entirely, not using anything of the docks that are there now. And Walter, I believe, put it in for $1 million. And the bond passed. The governor did sign it. I don't know how to get the money out of the, I've learned more about zoning and bond issues than I've ever thought I'd need to know in my life, but there is money there. The other aspect, and I know Bill is objecting to this, the Office of Fishing and Boating, which used to be known as the Mass Public Access Board, pays to have these types of ramps built and dredging. And the money that we pay as boaters in taxes goes towards that. And I know Bill's concern is that it's going to be open to the entire state. We're going to have thousands of boats coming down that don't belong to Milton residents. Let's not forget that we're a tidal estuary. And you can only use that river every other week. And every other weekend, it's a mud hole. So the river itself, if you could just...
Even for kayaks sometimes.
Yeah, well, even, you're not going to go kayaking, but if you could, Cheryl, would you mind going back to the beginning pictures? Just to give our low tide aspect look?
They cut the-
No, the one where you, no, the,
That one?
that one.
Okay.
If you see those boats on the upper left part on the back side,
So let me
of
see if
the-
I can do upper,
thank
up
you.
here,
No, well, down there,
here?
that water on a low tide, that's the channel. Those boats are moored right on the right-hand side of the channel outgoing
So this is the channel here,
to the,
so this area in here,
that area there.
But not this area.
This is a very old picture
okay?
because the river has changed its pattern. Going back to Mark Twain now, the boats that are on the left side of the picture on that curve,
Here,
that whole line of moorings is gone.
okay,
We've incorporated them into a longer string on the right side. That's on the outer right side of the channel, which at a high tide, you might get 12 feet. On a low tide, you're 3 to 4. If you look at the basin, and this was part of the thing when we were talking with crew, this is a low tide. That low tide area now extends out onto this side and the other side of the main float to the very end of it. So on a low tide, you used to have 2 or 3 feet, keep going out to the left. The main, right to the end of that dock. At a low tide, you have less than 8 inches of water.
well, that's why the dredging's required.
Correct, but I just want to point out, this graphic shows what would be a mid-tide, and that used to be a low tide. In the inside, the reason we went to that L dock configuration, it would have cut off our dinghy access, which is the back part, which looks like the top of a T on the right side. That's where our dinghies are, so we can get out to the boats on the floats. But that fishing boating access board, I think is something that should be looked at. We called them to see if they would in fact be interested in something, and they said they'd love to hear from the town manager and the town planner. They'd love to help do it. And the other thing is, we would like to get a long-term lease, just because, as with the Communist Party, 5-year plans don't work, and they're not going to work with us either, because at year 3, we start right where we are right now.
what are we gonna do? I have membership now that's looking at other yacht clubs, because we don't know if we're gonna have a house, a home, where can we put a boat? And it's a hell of a lot easier to find a parking spot in Beacon Hill than it is to find a boat, home for a summer. With all the commercial yards being bought up in marinas, like Marina Bay, a yacht club is working people's boats. The average boat owner in Massachusetts is, median income is under $100,000. The average boat owner in Massachusetts boat is 22 feet long. So we're not talking sitting on a Meridian like that got burnt up a couple weeks ago and it's $1 million. So, you know, we don't have $1 million boats at the club. And it will take away our camaraderie if we lose our working space, as well as a friendly neighbor next door who knows how to repair a diesel engine injector that you don't. The other thing I was gonna say, if you take away our boat storage in that boatyard A and take away boatyard storage in B, on any of the plans that have been put out, we're gonna lose between 20 and 50% of our boat storage spots. That's where our income comes from to pay the rent to the Parks Department of some $20,000 a year, is it? You get from us?
15.
14, 15.
14. So with loss of boat membership, loss of membership, we aren't gonna be able to do what we do. I don't have 60 members to lunch. I don't have 60 members to pick up the trash. I don't have the income to pay the trash removal, which is $150 a month during the summer. That comes to the Parks Department or whoever owns the property, because we're not gonna be able to do it. And that's about what I have to say.
So those last couple of comments have to do with what we were talking about in terms of management. You know, whether a new lease has the same kind of structure and deal, financial structure and maintenance responsibilities. Because if some of this is where the town needs to, and I'm not saying it's parks or, you know, who has to take responsibility, but it's really something that needs to be thought through. Because, you know, there are multiple users and, you know, multiple users maybe all have a lease, you know, I don't know. But, you know, where if there is a lease, like one of the things we were talking about is if this is the area and the amount of area for storage of that what drives that is that they need to make the income to pay the lease. Maybe the lease term needs to change so that the accommodation, you know, so that we can achieve some of the goals we're looking at there. So
In the summer, when you were talking about parking earlier, if you look at where you've got penciled in canoe, kayak, in that green right there,
yeah.
that's currently what we term boatyard A. The other one, the lower, is what we term boatyard B. So if you see that in any documentation, just so it clarifies for other, I know the MPIC is tired of hearing the difference between A and B.
And I have never been able to keep them straight, so. But here, just to point out, one of the reasons we said that the ramp helps too, because we eliminate the ramp at this end and we remove crew from this end and we can move some of that boat down further if that works. So, these are diagrams, right? You really need to get something where you're looking at what size are the cradles, what size are the trailers, you know, how they really fit, you know, how that, and Richard, sorry.
Oh,
May I
sorry.
borrow that again? One of the things we did talk about is like, can this push back at all so that there's any room, you know, to grab a little bit more of this land side here. Some of this gets steeper here, but not so over here. So that's,
But if the canoe kayak storage is seasonal and it's there for summer, if we can get in there at the end of September 15th, October 1st, and then be out by May 15th, it can revert back to that. What I'm saying is we don't want to lose that seasonal, off-season storage for the boats in the winter.
The off-season.
So
right,
part of it is,
Right.
it's the land plan, how do you fit it? You know, you have a vision that it has to be right there. Our question is, can it really fit? Can you still fit and move it over? And it's not something we can answer until we get a more detailed plan, I think.
Well, with
Right, so, like-
removal of the cradles,
Yeah,
Yes.
we're going to jack stands in
Right.
blocks.
And then you get parking, so that's what I was going
And
to.
then we
Yeah.
can move I believe Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you had a head count down, and there was, I believe, 15 or 16 trailers in Boatyard A? Is
Yeah.
that what you counted, Bill?
See, the total of 14.
All right, so those trailers can move to the lower half of B, head to toe, and cover about 1/3. Then in the winter, go back there with the boats on, it takes up enough
But
space.
Bill, that's what we're talking about. See, everything to be consistent to the existing documents we have right now, both in the lease and in the special permit, talks about seasonal boat storage. And what's your definition of seasonal? I mean, to me, I thought it would
When
go
you say-
from,
No, when you're saying, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
right,
Because it says seasonal boat storage.
right,
Seasonal boat storage, to me, is winter.
Right.
right.
Off-seasonal boat storage, I still need someplace to put the trailer.
Yeah, but see, that's not in here, and I think that's
That's why I'm trying to clarify.
That's part of
What's your
the,
lease
part of
say
the.
But
now?
that's in our notes.
What's your lease say, the current, whatever you're working off of now? I know there's a time.
Boatyard A must be
In the water?
converted to parking lot by July 15. And
That's very good.
then on September 15, boat storage can resume back in A.
So what we're looking to
Most of
do,
May to October.
so what we were looking to do here, just to be clear, is to get a bit of, right now, to walk along here, it's not the same as walking along here. So the idea was if you're coming down to the park, you can go to this part of the park, cross over here, walk along and walk here, and just give a little bit of a green buffer. That was and then to accommodate the seasonal rentals. Swapping that for land down here and then potentially pushing into here was the way to have it not be as much loss as what some other schemes were looking at in terms of storage. But it takes a more detailed engineered plan to confirm the actual, like if you go to the very end of these, where these are partial engineered plans here. I don't know if you can see here, but these are actual sizes of the shells that they own. You can actually see the parking spaces laid out here, and there's a few there. And these are contours, so every very heavy green line is a 5-foot contour. So you can see here, you're looking at 5, 10, 15 feet up to here. So you've got to cut into this or put those things at a deep, and you can see here, you could cut back into here to get more storage with a small retaining wall. So it's a question of doing that, land plan a little bit further, with a little further analysis, because it's all tight. Are you going to fit it all? And if you do, and if you have to put walls in, what's the cost of that? And that's to give more transition from the green space to the storage. Some of the things that we've heard.
So, go ahead.
So just to clarify, under the current conditions, the boats are in the water for 3.5 months.
May, June, July, August, September.
But it's
We
the
start
half of
going
that
in
month and
we
half of
start
another, so
going
maybe
in-
it's 4.
We start putting boats in May.
But so if we're just talking about the use and opening up of Boatyard A, are those some of the first boats that go in or the last boats that go in?
Most of those are all trailable fiberglass boats.
Yep.
They start first,
Okay.
to be honest with you.
So.
It's easier to put the smaller boats in there than the bigger boats.
But they can
Right,
do a
but-
limited number. because of
So,
the method.
to get back to the, is it seasonal or winter? Winter's 8
Winters
months
are
out of the year.
off-season.
Right, so it's really off-season, not necessarily
Right.
winter. It's not January, February, and March. You still kind of lose some of the spring and the fall in terms of access Boatyard A. So then the other point that I wanted to make was we're talking about users and leases, but also crew is a big component down here that they should either have some type of agreement about their responsibility to take care of some of the land, or, I don't think that should get lost in the conversation and the agreements as well.
So one of the things that we were saying about, and Scott, I think you brought up in terms of, who's responsible for what. This is one of the big issues, because as Bill reminds me, the 88 Wharf special permit says that they are to maintain the park, and then the yacht club lease says that they're to maintain some of the same land area, and then Parks cuts the grass on the farmer's market and the property behind the Swift Hat. So it's probably because these documents have been around for a while and boards and leaseholders, et cetera, have changed, you know, who does what is probably, and who's responsible for what. It could use a little bit of review. Again, the special permit for 88 Wharf not only addresses the parking, but it does address the public access components.
There's two Chapter 91 licenses down here, one for 88 Wharf and one for the town. The towns take into account its own walkways, the ramp, and the dock. 88 Wharfs takes into account 41 Wharf Street and
But
88.
41 just is,
Let's put it back together.
it's
Overuse.
here.
That's 41.
So what does it say? Chapter 91 says what?
Chapter 91, they have a Chapter 91 license for 41.
88
It
Wharf
goes, yes, it's combined with the building, Chapter 41.
So
Chapter
their Chapter 91 for going here and
Yes.
around the building is combined with this?
Again, if you can watch the water come up, which you can watch it come up on
Yeah.
the wall, therefore it's filled tidelands. That building has a Chapter 91 license.
Well, private development on waterfront in Massachusetts requires public access.
The rotunda in Boston Harbor Hotel, you can walk around that
Yes, you
24
can.
hours a day because Chapter 91 license.
I've seen it oftentimes where that's why there's a restaurant or why there's public restrooms. And you'll see a sign downtown Boston, restrooms available to the public, go see so-and-so, and that's part of their Chapter 91, yeah.
West
That's the
Augusta
restaurant
Yacht,
at 88 Wharf. The restaurant at 88 Wharf.
Right.
West Augusta Yacht Club took Chapter 91 money 3 years ago. That's how they built that that breakwater to protect them from the ocean.
Well, the other thing I was gonna say, in another favor for that, how do you say, boat ramp that would be allow a commercial hauler to put our boats in and out versus the railway, is that they're far more efficient than we are
Oh, yeah,
manually.
yeah,
What takes
absolutely.
us 10 weekends to
Yeah.
launch a fleet of boats, they can do in probably 2.
We do 20 boats a day at Town River. We have our own. We do
Our-
20 a day.
What I'm saying is what's taking us from
Yeah, even,
mid-March, in 2 weekends, we could empty that boat, the whole place out in 2 weekends and be in by no later than June 1 or, May 15th.
And
So
less than that off-season.
And then
Yeah.
coming back out, we could haul the first 2 weeks of October and have everybody out.
Yeah.
the two things that you said are absolutely 100%, and I agree with you totally. To anything you're going to do to affect the parking lots, the storage, or the water is A, you have to do the ramp because that's the only way you get rid of the cable and the winch, which is
Well,
beyond
it'll
anything.
also help us attract members.
Right,
because-
absolutely. The second thing is in any yacht, and for, I'm in a yacht club just like you, much of what you said. And you are not, there are 2 in Milton. They are one of two yacht clubs on the Neponset River in the town of Milton. So you don't know that. So the Neponset River Yacht Club is at Granite Avenue on the inside, in
Oh, I
Milton
know that was
waterways,
Milton,
which is
okay.
almost exclusively
I thought that was
Milton
Boston.
residents again. They're
Okay.
the members there. But they don't have any docks because it's, the title moves, they're all moorings. Well, they have one small dock, but the point is, in any yacht club, it's 2 seasons. So summer is you're in the water, winter you're in storage. But we have 300 boats. Boats are on block and stands. Where those boats are right now, you can't put 10 cars in the parking lot. But in the summer, we have to put 60 cars in that parking lot. The blocks and stands, you take the blocks and stands down, so the cradles go. So all of this here are a good, let's go back to whatever that last slide was.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, she doesn't share well.
That one?
No, go back
Oh,
to
you
the
want
other. Go back to this one, all right, yeah, so you put the ramp, I mean, this is so simple. You put the ramp in. All the boats that are here, you put them away in the summer, boats are on the water in the summer, you park. It's all parking.
You have to get rid of the trailers.
Yep. The trailers are a middle thing, the cradles are gone, there are no more cradles.
No, but I mean, the
Yeah, the trailers, but they have far more bigger boats than they have. I view the trailers as the lesser issue The cradles and the
Right.
big boats is the bigger issue.
Well,
This is all the cradles.
Then we can talk about that, but I think that part of the discussion we've been
Oh, I
talking
think,
about.
I agree that, but I
You know,
think
is
it's like a
that,
huge
is that we
step.
can figure out something to do with the trailers, which
If we
fits,
put the trailers on the lower third of that 10,000, you've got the up 2/3 of that 10,000 is.
why don't we take them and put them up in the DPW yet? Would that be all
Can't go
right?
on the road.
Dick, I thought of that. I
No,
thought of the
no,
same
but
thing.
no,
They
but
can't go on
Billy,
the road,
Billy
the
said, you said the
trailers
last
aren't.
time, the problem was they weren't registered. And I thought afterwards, they said, how do they get down there then?
Yeah.
You know when you go to your account, you know when you go to your accountant in April and you see
No.
that little guy that says, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil?
He's correct, in most trailers that do come to yacht clubs, they never leave there.
Yeah, so, but I think that, but that's taken up, if you know, if you get down there and you take a look, it just takes up a lot of space. I said, leave the cradles as best we can. They look good, they're historic, I get all that. It's that the trailers are just someone's trailer. If it's not there, it's in someone's driveway, it's in someone's backyard, put them in their grandmother's, you know, behind the garage, but it just takes up so much space that falls off the table when we talk about seasonal boat storage. That's all.
But I think if you looked at the lower half of that lot, I mean, all the activity is up in that park area. It's not gonna be in that lower half.
We could talk about that.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm good.
I just wanted to, and thinking about another potential source of funds, it would require the town passing the CPA, but would the CPA be able to be a source of funds?
Good luck with that one.
Talk about this tonight?
No, I'm just saying, if you think of it as one of your potential sources, talk about affordable housing
Let's get
source.
through Article 37 first, and then
Yeah.
we'll talk about
Who wants to bring that one up again?
Historic purposes.
You're the best.
Historic purpose,
Oh,
what,
We're
park
gonna take a
purpose?
20-minute recess, we're gonna come back and talk about the CPA.
May just be the two of you.
I'll be back in a
Thank you. Listen, I'm
Sorry, it wasn't on the agenda.
That's right.
And I just want to, and anyone else have any other comments for Bill? I mean,
I
you-
actually-
Wasn't there a
Go ahead.
question? Yeah.
She left. But I think she got it in now. Go ahead. Go ahead, Melinda.
Well, the only thing, I take the ramp, you know, should be first. And I don't want to lose sight of the wall, and I'm wondering what the synergy could be
To do them both together.
between doing them both together. I have no idea, I'm not an engineer.
Well, where the current railway
You-
is now, there's wall down there because of the slope.
Right,
When we talked, between the crew and myself, talked to Walter, we kind of built in $350,000 or $400,000, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. It was a July conversation, and I was on the back of my boat. But that was $100,000 we thought would do it if they could just come in and re-slope it. The other money, a couple of the guys at the club are contractors, engineers, et cetera, they said if the wall structure was not great, you might be another couple of hundred to reinforce just that section there.
okay,
But around the corner on the front,
Who knows?
who knows?
right.
But we picked up when we had a couple of pieces of equipment down there, we put some of the boulders that were falling down off of the current state ramp back into place to kind of shore them up, but that's,
State ramp. That's a joke.
Well, if this ramp is removed, you'd have to do work there anyway. So, you know, to the extent that you have to come down there.
but I would implore that you could just look at that public access board. I know they put a new acronym on their name, but they have the money and it'll save the town a hell of a lot of money and time.
You just recently, did you go to Seaport Council? You and Katie, when you went to something where they talked, I've known about it because we don't have a
Oh,
seat.
I-
Quincy and Boston both have seats
Yeah.
on it.
I looked it up, I didn't go.
And it's definitely, I've talked to the Quincy Harbor Master, a lot of, they've got a lot of money from that town. Look, I get your point on the lease. I mean, Katie knows I've been waiting to get to this night for I don't know how many months. Just
We have to.
I know you have. But and at least for me personally, not for, I in no way want to see that yacht club gone. I understand the benefits of yacht clubs and see, even, people didn't even realize there's two in Milton. It's a very collegial thing. It's a very important thing. There are hundreds in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it's part of history, and just as I said, and I said this when they wanted to tear down the MAC, build a firehouse, I spent my whole life in public safety. We've never in this community crushed one person's dream to create another. And I thought long and hard about anything that we've ever done that, and we never have. So I'm confident that amongst all of us, they've done a ton of work here to get this here. Like I sense Mr. Burke's in fact, oh, I get that. Believe me. And look, now we kind of know
Yeah.
we can start to chip away at this.
Yeah. But that's, as I said, on behalf of my membership, we do appreciate everybody's efforts and the open-mindedness, and, you know, we do have our agreements to disagree, but I think we all agree that that ramp is the key to the whole bloody thing.
Right.
So I'm gonna leave you with a funny story.
We do agree on that. all.
So the head of the, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just
go
before,
ahead.
I don't want to, let's leave the funny story for last. Because mine is not funny at all. Mine's about process. So we have recommendations that have been made to our two boards. Seems to me that it would be nice if we could have some consensus on whether we accept the recommendations and then what are the next steps. And it may be easier to get that consensus if maybe, you know, a couple of members of our board have a working group with maybe one member there.
I just text that to.
Yeah, and just so if we have a working group among our boards, and then they could make a recommendation, yeah, let's accept these recommendations and let's hear the steps. That make it easier for me as a member of our board.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Could we suggest that you add some stakeholders to that working group?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. So I'll leave you this story. So the head of the farmer's market calls me in October, middle of harvest season. Gene Boylan said, "Can you come down and meet me today?" So I drive down. I said, "What's nice is a problem." So I drive down to the farmer's market. I park on the side by 88 Wharf. There's a huge 10-inch pothole. People are tripping in it. He says, "I'm trying to get it fixed." So I call Chase, I take pictures of it. I call Chase, DPW director on the phone. It was definitely so it's pouring rain the day I get on there. So I wound up double parked. We were standing in the middle of the street. Yesterday I got a ticket in the mail from the MBTA. The car comes in, it goes by, it has a camera on the roof. I must have parked on the T-line.
Oh, really?
So there's an appeal process. So you can go, so I go online this morning, I write the appeal, who I am, what I was doing there. 30 seconds later, denied. Wow. So I think you appreciate that. It's never always easy. Good.
And as far as stakeholders, sorry.
One thing we should mention is that I think this two-year process has actually led to some dialogues. The Yacht Club and the crew have actually, after MAPC's report was in, came back to us with this idea of a combined dock that they worked out on their own. They proposed to us. We thought it made sense. So I think they haven't gone through this process. Even this, the process itself has gotten stakeholders talking and trying to propose solutions here as well. So thank you for your feedback that you've given us and talking with each other.
Right, and just because Prue's not here, any representative, and Jean is not here, but they have been involved in the dialogue along the way as well. And so as far as the people to include in the working group, or at least keep engaged. And I would also suggest that if there's interest in getting input from Charles River Kayak, I think they've changed their name now, but they have expressed interest in coming to Milton. So at least find out what their needs are. If they did come, what kind of, lease arrangement or what have you would they be looking at? Just so that idea gets a little bit more fleshed out.
If you watch them, I mean, you guys watch, I mean, I'm there all the time. If you watch the river, and Katie will remember this, I got in trouble about 10 years ago because the Coast Guard, the chief, called me and said, "Well, that river's getting really busy, you should have, we gave you a boat for free."
For my time.
Gave us a boat for free, oh my God. But they could see that, and if you're on that river, you can just see the number, especially in the summer, kayaks, canoes, even jet skis. I took a video of jet skis coming, and these are things that, it truly is a jewel. And even for kayakers, it's from Granite Ave in that is the most beautiful part. I mean, it's
That's
absolutely,
where well, that's where you see the seals and the lakes. They
absolutely
fall,
beautiful.
And the herons.
And the eagle.
Well, the other thing I was as part of this waterfront study, I mean, the goose population is really severe down there. And I would not let my kids play in that park, nor would I let them play in that sandbox. I've been on golf courses that have less geese that you don't even want to play golf on.
Wow.
But I looked into trumpeter swans. You can buy a mating pair for $1,500.
And the geese won't come?
They do not like each other. So when the swans are mating, they will chase off the geese. So I will
Well, there
read
you
you
go.
Can we keep the
There's one in Turner's Pond, maybe we can.
That was one of the things.
Relocate.
Instead of getting dogs and stuff like that, or throwing firecrackers, that maybe a couple of pair of mating trumpeter swans, because they're, once you put them in there, like, they stay in that area.
That was my next question.
You mean-
Like, then you buy them and
But then you
No, they-
just-
float.
It
Yeah. No, they
kinda
stay
get
there.
swans.
Yeah, yeah.
Make
Does
a
anyone in
mess.
this room, Bill's gonna know the answer to this. 20 years ago, someone very notable in the state came to take a ride on that river because he'd heard about how beautiful it was. Who was it?
Well,
Bill
Bill Wells.
Bill Wells.
you went up the river on.
But he didn't go swimming
Oh,
there.
how else is it? No, he didn't swim in it.
Swimming in the Charles, he got sick.
No,
What is Charles?
he's an avid duck hunter.
Yeah.
And he called all his friends and said, you want to leave the ducks in the fall? And we still have duck hunting in the fall up in the, and some of those little Gulliver's Creek, some of those spots there.
Yeah, that was on the former harbor master's boat, Smoky 2, John O'Donnell's boat. John took him up the river.
Anything else?
Up on Green Street.
Thank you all, on behalf of all of us, thank you, I know there's been a lot of work, and you're definitely doing something that's going to enhance this community. Maybe not tomorrow, but one day.
Can we just get it off our desk?
No one said it was gonna be easy, but no one said it was gonna be this hard, I'll tell you that right now. See you later. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no. I was at Wells House,